Welcome back to another episode of Random Finds in Paleo Media. This episode has been long overdue, to say the least. To give you an idea of how long it's been, the first episode was featured in May. It is currently September right now. But during my time away from this series, I've come across several pieces of smaller scale dinosaur related media, some of which will be featured today. In case you haven't picked up on it already, this is a series that I come back to during times when content is slow, or if I'm working on a bigger project and want to put something out for you guys to tide you over until then. If you aren't familiar with the series, I'll link episode 1 in the description down below, but if you don't want to watch episode 1, that's fine. To briefly summarize, Random Finds in Paleo Media is a series in which I cover a short compilation of smaller scale topics relating to any piece of dinosaur media that simply doesn't have enough to be its own video. Typically, I'll have a few entries lined up for each episode that can vary between any and all types of media, including video games, movies, shows, books, or just random stuff from around the internet. You know me, as long as it's got dinosaurs in it, it'll make it on here. And today's episode actually has two topics that were suggested by fans, one from the comments section of my channel and one from my Discord server. So if you want to suggest more things for me to cover in this series, you can go to my Discord server, the Jurassic Junction, and do it there, or comment something down below in this video. With all of that said and done, let's get into today's topics. If you're a dinosaur nerd like myself, then Primeval needs no introduction, but for those of you that may not know, Primeval is a British science fiction TV show that was made by Tim Haynes, the very man that helped create the beloved Walking With series. The show features a team of scientists who attempt to figure out what is causing strange anomalies that lead into prehistoric times to open up in their modern world. Because of this phenomenon, prehistoric animals enter the anomalies through their own time period to the present and wreak havoc across the United Kingdom. And even after its eventual cancellation, the show maintained high praise from the fan base it formed during its original run. The show has a total of 5 series and ran from 2007 to 2011, not counting its 2012 Canadian spin-off series. In that time, the original British series has had a handful of dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures that were cut or unused, despite some of them being confirmed to be in the show. Some of these creatures included Therizinosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, Diplodocus, Thernaxodon, and the future reptile. Dinosaurs like the Therizinosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus were scheduled to be in episodes in the first series, but were cut for reasons that are unknown. Other creatures like Thernaxodon were simply said to appear in the show, but just never did. Then there was the decision to add an animal from the future into the show, which would lead to the design of the future reptile, which ended up being cut because it looked too much like a dinosaur, and the creators wanted something more distinct. As a result, the future reptile was later replaced with the future predator. But my favorite cut creature has to be the Diplodocus, which according to Andrew Lee Potts, the person who played Connor in the series, he said in a 2018 Comic-Con interview that it was cut for budgetary reasons.
I know there was an episode where they had plans, and I think it was down to budget that they didn't do it, was Diplodocus coming through, which that's my favourite dinosaur, so just the sheer scale of it and the fact of what we'd have to do. Obviously, it wouldn't be a predator in any, but it would be smashing stuff up and confused, and they were going to do, like, parasites, because the parasites would have been huge, that would carry, and they were dropping off, and we were having to deal with them, so that would have been a cool episode if we didn't do that. And I always said I just wanted to ride a jet ski at some point, that didn't happen.
But this isn't where the list of unused creatures ends. In fact, it takes a rather interesting turn. The creators of Primeval set up an event called Create Your Own Creature Competition in 2008, which allowed fans of the show to submit a design of their own original future creature for the chance to have their creation appear in the show, along with a behind-the-scenes tour of the creators of Primeval adapting their creature into the show. Which sounds pretty fucking awesome to me. The winner of this competition was a 16-year-old kid named Karim Nahabu, I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that, who submitted his design of a large futuristic bug creature known as the Megopteran, and was featured in the 8th episode of the 3rd series. In total, there are about 5,000 viewers that had submitted their work, but only a handful of the designs made by fans are featured. Despite not being the choices for the competition, a lot of these submissions contain really strange creatures that I just couldn't not mention. One was of a flea creature made by John Joseph Brumby that would have had a sharp tongue that would have been used to drink blood, along with being able to inject its eggs within its prey. Lovely. Another creature was the Mandron, who was created by Jake Mansbridge. These creatures were meant to be the missing link between apes and a new, more advanced race of humans. It would look like this hairless, long-armed, ugly-looking thing, but would have had a large brain and almost be as intelligent as humans. Then there's the Draptosaurus that was created by Christopher Bryant, which was a creature with very strong skin, could run very fast, and had a tail that had a talon at the end of it. While it seemed like a strong predator, it had poor eyesight and smell. The specific one also had its arm torn off for some reason, but was sewn back on by someone. Then we have the Dunkleodon, created by Richard James Partridge, which was supposed to be a futuristic and terrestrial version of the Dunkleosteus. It had armor covering all areas of its body except the rear end, which didn't really matter as it didn't have any natural predators. But he himself was a predator and would take down prey with its brute strength. And finally, we have the strangest creature called Chaos, created by Indy Taylor. Chaos was supposed to be a living magnetic form made up of anomalies, dinosaurs, and prehistoric reptiles like T-Rex, Utahraptor, the future predator, and Pteranodon. Apparently, it could consume living creatures, cause rips in history, and make it so that people, creatures, and even entire eras just disappear with no trace. Very creative and even terrifying, especially coming from a 10-year-old. There are many examples of cancelled dinosaur games, especially in recent times. Unfortunately, the reason for their cancellation for some of these games are due to more malicious things. At this point, it doesn't seem that surprising anymore when it's been announced that another dinosaur game has been cancelled, but it was recently brought to my attention by a commenter that there was another older dinosaur game that was planned to release about a decade ago. And the thing is, this specific game didn't receive that much attention or coverage, and as a result has been forgotten by many except for the few that remembered its existence. This game was called Venture Dinosauria. And when I say that this game hadn't received much coverage or attention, that's because the game didn't really get that far. Besides a few promo images, one in-game picture, at least I think that's an in-game picture, and a whole blog made by the creator of the game himself, that's pretty much it. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's start at the beginning. The company responsible for Venture Dinosauria was known as Pocket Watch Games, but the man who was directly involved in the game's creation was Andy Schatz. Andy seems to be no stranger to creating video games, as Venture Dinosauria was actually going to be the third installment of a series of animal sims that he has been making all the way back to 2005. The overall objective of these games was to build a functional and thriving ecosystem for the animals while keeping nature at a steady balance. The first of this series was called Wildlife Tycoon Venture Africa, which had the player strategically construct an ecosystem that was suitable for the African wildlife like lions, elephants, zebras, and so on. A sequel was made in 2007 known as Venture Arctic, which had the same premise, focusing on building an ecosystem and keeping the balance of nature for the various Arctic wildlife featured within the game. The game didn't have too much traction for over a year after its release. However, after Andy made the game free on Steam on Christmas of 2008, the statistics for the game had skyrocketed. After a little over a week, the amount of people playing Venture Arctic had increased over 1,500%. After over a year, the game had finally become a success, and as a result, Venture Africa also gained more traction and was being purchased by many. So with this in mind, it's not surprising that Andy was looking to make another game in the series. This game would have the same premise as the last two, but would instead incorporate dinosaurs in a prehistoric landscape instead of modern animals in a modern age. Concept images show what the dinosaurs would have potentially looked like in the game. Among the dinosaurs featured in this art includes T-Rex, Stegosaurus, and Quetzalcoatlus. However, there was also a first look image posted onto the blog site that Andy used to talk about his game that featured a T-Rex within the in-game environment. Along with this image, he revealed more about how the game was apparently supposed to revolve around mutations, battles, and epic scale. The blog this is featured on has several hyperlinks that all go back to the official Pocket Watch game site. However, clicking on these links now will only take you to dead pages. It seems that a lot of the information of the game has been lost to time, but the real question is here, why wasn't this game ever released? Well, in 2013, a site known as Game Developer would interview Andy about another one of his games, but eventually the conversation would turn to his previous Venture series. Here, he mentions that one of the things he wanted to do with Venture Dinosauria was to have a game that had a good balance of being both interesting and fun. However, Andy continues the interview by talking about the difficulty behind making a Sims game, saying, "The real problem with building simulation games is that they're never any fun until well into the project, making it difficult to assess whether you've actually got a good game until months and years into development." Along with the difficulty behind making a Sims game in general, he also goes more in depth as to why Venture Dinosauria specifically had issues. He said, "I just never found a way to make it both fun and open-ended, but also a small and self-contained experience at the same time. With Dinosauria, I wanted to make the defining piece on what the world would look like when it was just dinosaurs. What did an actual dinosaur ecosystem look like? How did dinosaurs sleep? How did they pee? But we don't think about them that way. We think about them as ancient monsters, and I wanted to portray them as animals, but I never discovered that game." I appreciate the visions that Andy had for a game like Venture Dinosauria, as for the time it would have been a breath of fresh air to have had a game that portrayed dinosaurs in a more natural light, rather than trying to make them seem terrifying. Not that that's a bad thing, but sometimes in execution it just doesn't always work. But another reason is just because variety within this genre is always good, and something like this, had it been made, most likely would have been a memorable dinosaur game. This is an entry that I recently found out about, and just had to include due to how significant it is to the channel. If you guys don't remember, I did a video earlier this year where I took a closer look at what the first ever dinosaur movie was. And in my search for this movie, I ran into a couple of notable mentions that I couldn't not talk about in that video due to how significant they are in their respective industry. One of those movies that I ran into was a 1914 title known as Gertie the Dinosaur. And the reason why this movie is so special is because it is the first animated movie to ever feature a dinosaur and would ultimately contribute to the long and rich history of animation within the film industry. If you want to know more about it, I suggest watching my video on the topic of first dinosaur movies. But to summarize, Gertie the Dinosaur came from the mind of Winsor McCay, an American cartoonist and animator who worked on this movie in his spare time. To bring his cartoon dinosaur to life, McCay would use a method similar to that of Flipbooks, and as a result, he would draw thousands of frames of Gertie using rice paper. And McCay was very intricate with the process, ensuring that he was accurate with the timing and motion of things like Gertie's breathing and movements. Along with this, he would also develop his own techniques to improve certain areas of his film, and he did all of this during his spare time. After it was all said and done, the film would come out to about 12 minutes and would feature in theaters in early 1914, to which audiences reacted in a positive way, and even though I don't know exactly how much it made, it is said that his first few films were among the first to have a commercial impact in the animation film industry. So with all of this success, it would make sense that a sequel would be possible. And in 1921, McCay would begin the process of making this happen. The sequel was called Gertie on Tour and would feature the adorable animated sauropod in New York City and Washington, D.C., doing all sorts of gags and getting into more mischief. However, for reasons that are unknown, the production for this film would be stopped and the film itself would be cancelled. According to various sites, some of the gags that Gertie would do were things like bouncing on the Brooklyn Bridge and attempting to eat the Washington Monument. However, production would never get this far. There are excerpts on YouTube of what did get done with the film, which is only about a minute or so of content and doesn't really feature any of the things I just mentioned. In one fragment of the excerpt, it shows her interested in a toad, but immediately gets scared of it after it jumps, which sends her running and accidentally touching a power line. In the next fragment, she plays around with a train cart and eventually takes it off the tracks. And in the final fragment, it shows Gertie going to sleep, dreaming about the time where she was, quote unquote, the life of the party, to which the movie then fades to her performing to her fellow herd members, which feels unintentionally sad to me. I might be making something out of nothing here, but it just feels like in this modern world, Gertie is the last of her kind, and in this excerpt, she dreams about the time where she was with her herd, because she misses being a part of her own species group. I don't know if that was the intention behind the sequel. My guess is that they were just gonna go for another comedy bit similar to that of the first film, but because it was cancelled and McCay's work was poorly preserved, I guess we'll never truly know. However, it's amazing to see works like this archived to see what could have been. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I'm extremely sorry that it took me a while to get out, but I did mention it in the last video that school was gonna start and I was gonna be busier, and my God, I did not expect that I was going to be this busy. School's kind of kicking my ass right now, but that's fine. That's to be expected. But that doesn't mean that I don't have stuff planned out. I have a bunch of big projects planned out, and I really don't want to spoil anything, but hopefully they will be out relatively soon. What I can't wait for is October. October is probably my favorite time to make content. I got a lot of stuff planned for October, so hopefully I can get started on that. That way, by the time I upload it, it'll be October. But we'll have to see. I'm trying to plan accordingly here. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. That's part of the reason why I finally decided to do the second episode of Random Finds, is because I have a couple of big projects in the works, and because content has just slowed because of school. So regardless, I'm really happy with how this episode came out. I'm really proud of it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. And if you did, leave a like, subscribe. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for now. Thank you so much for watching, and please have a nice day.